If I had a dollar for every time the internet argued over Rory Gilmore's boyfriends, I'd be rich. Hi, I'm Mia. I'm a fangirl content creator. I make videos about books, movies, music, TV shows, etc. And today we're doing a psychological case study of Rory Gilmore's boyfriends. I'm not just talking about Team Dean, Team Jess, Team Logan. We're actually talking about psychological concepts. I'll be going into attachment styles, power dynamics, boundaries, etc. It's not just who I think is hottest, although that probably will come up. My qualifications for this are that I've seen the show multiple times from season 1 to 7 of the original show and the 4 episodes of A Year in the Life, all of which we will be considering today. I'm graduating in the spring with a degree in psychology, with my personal interests and specialties being in relationships and communication. And I'm also an intense fangirl that loves to overanalyze fictional characters. So let's get into it. I'll be scoring the boys in 5 categories. First off, we have whether or not he respects Rory's time and goals. Throughout the whole show, she's balancing school, work, life, family chaos. A good partner supports the ambitions and doesn't make her feel bad for having a life. Category 2 is, are they emotionally safe and not controlling? We'll look for jealousy, guilt tripping, boundary pushing versus healthy support. Number 3, communication. Do they attempt to communicate? Not just grand gestures, but can they talk about their issues? Now, this one will be a little bit more nuanced because we do see how most of the boys grow throughout the show. Therefore, their communication styles and abilities change. Number 4 is life stage compatibility. Does this relationship fit where Rory is developmentally? And number 5, growth, not regression. Does she become a better version of herself with them, or does she spiral? First up, we have Dean Forrester. Dean starts as the sweet, attentive first boyfriend. The information that we get about Dean's background is that he has a loving, supportive, nuclear family. His dad works, his mom stays home, he has a little sister. Dean shows up as the sweet, attentive first boyfriend. He builds her a car, he listens to her talk about books. Lorelai loves him. Throughout their relationship, we see that they don't have a lot of shared interests, but they make a point to learn about and be involved in each other's interests. One day, Rory will pick the movie, the next, Dean will. He understands that her family is the most important thing to her, and he respects that. However, he quickly shows possessive behavior. Fans and critics have often pointed out his jealousy and possessive behavior, specifically concerning Jess. He becomes increasingly insecure when Jess is around and reacts by monitoring and criticizing Rory and her whereabouts. Instead of trusting her, he gets insecure and makes it worse for himself, honestly. Now, I will say his insecurities and doubts were not completely unfounded. Like, Rory did, in fact, have feelings for Jess, but the way that Dean went about communicating those feelings and dealing with those feelings was not cute. Then we have the big kahuna of Dean telling Rory that he loves her. Now, if I'm correct, they had been dating for only a few months at this point. He built her a car, they're celebrating their 3-month anniversary, I think, and he confesses that he loves her. Rory, however, is not ready to say the same thing, and Dean has a big fit about it. 2 points though in Dean's favor. Unrequited love is so hard. Telling somebody that you love them, being vulnerable with them, and them not feeling the same way is difficult. That's a difficult thing to deal with. But a good, healthy boyfriend would understand that she might just need more time, because she definitely was not saying, no, I don't love you and I want to not be with you anymore. She wanted to be with Dean. She just wasn't ready to say the L word. Additionally, I would like to hold space for the fact that Dean and Rory were very, very young in this relationship. They were in high school. I think they were 15, 16, 17 maybe. So it's not necessarily fair to hold them to the same accountability that we would a full blown adult. Teenagers do not have the same emotional stability, availability, vulnerability, all the abilities. As a teenager, you have to work really hard if you want to have the same emotional intelligence as an adult. But for the sake of this video, we kind of are going to hold them to that standard, especially because as we see Dean in later seasons and in A Year in the Life, we're not exactly seeing another level of maturity there. Also, my literal least favorite story arc in this entire show is when Dean and Rory have an affair. Dean is married to Lindsay. They get married very young, and that's a whole other discussion. But either way, they're married, and Dean ends up having an affair with Rory. Now, like I said, this is literally my least favorite story arc in the entire show. Don't cheat on your wife. And also, Rory is over here acting like everything is totally fine. My Dean, like, no, literally no. So for me, that really brings Dean's points down because, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? That is not a romantic gesture. That is a red flag with a flannel shirt on. So, now that we've got that rant out of the way, Dean's psychological read is an anxious attachment style. He needs consistent reassurance. He panics when Rory has separate interests or hangs out with other people, and he uses guilt to try and draw her back in. He does the whole, you're not paying enough attention to me, instead of voicing that he's feeling insecure and might need a little bit more reassurance. When it comes to power and boundaries, I think he's threatened by ambition. My read from it was that he didn't love the fact that Rory was going to Chilton and going to Yale. He also used the whole, like, I built you a car thing as, like, you therefore owe me your time and attention, which, like, I think that she was very grateful that he built her a car, but that to me says that he didn't build her a car because he loved her and wanted to build her a car. He's holding that over her head, you know? For Dean's scores, in the category of respecting her goals, I would give him a 3 out of 10. He definitely doesn't really push her. She pushes him for sure, helps him realize that he can do more with his life than he is planning, but they're just not intellectually on the same level, which is not an immediate no, but I don't feel like he respects her goals and her ambition and pushes her to be a better version of herself. So he's getting a 3. For emotional safety, he's getting a 2. Communication, I'm gonna give him a 4, sort of keeping in mind that they are super young, but still not good. Life stage fit, I'm gonna give it a 6, okay? They were young, they were in high school. I think that Dean was a really good first boyfriend for Rory. And in terms of Rory's growth, I'm giving him a 3. Dean was a great training wheels boyfriend, but not a long term partner. So now we move on to Jess. Jess is kind of a complicated case. And if you're asking me just based off of like looks, my personal favorite, when I first watched this, I was really young and was not ready to actually look at the meat and potatoes of the relationships, and Jess was definitely my choice. So we'll see if that changes. As for Jess's backstory, the canon information that we get is that his dad left him, and Liz, his mom, was pretty unstable. She had unstable relationships and partners and dealt with alcohol issues. So, all of that is going to come with behavioral problems, which we definitely see. But Jess is clearly intellectual, and he has intellectual chemistry with Rory. They bond over books and music, but of course, they don't have the same feelings about family. As a teen, he's emotionally unavailable. He dodges conversation, he deflects with sarcasm, and he disappears instead of dealing with conflict. He did care about Rory, and we could see that, but he didn't know how to properly tell her or express those feelings. The fact that Jess leaves without saying goodbye, and then comes back and tells Rory that he loves her, and then leaves again, it's not cute. It's not cute. He's cute, but that's not cute. However, in later seasons, Jess comes back and it is very clear that he has matured. Now, I'm not even talking about a year in the life yet because that's like totally drastic. But in the later seasons, once Rory is actually with Logan, she visits Jess at his bookshop party thing, and he seems so much more mature and put together. And he's the one that calls out Rory for dropping out of Yale. In terms of Jess's psychological read, he gives dismissive avoidant attachment style. He pushes people away before they can abandon him, and he uses sarcasm, withdrawal, and disappearing as a defense mechanism. It totally makes sense that this would be his reaction because he does have abandonment issues. His dad literally abandoned him, and his mom basically gave up on him and sent him to be with Luke. So it makes sense that he has this trauma, he has those wounds, but he definitely takes that out on everybody around him, including Rory. However, I can see in his character that he doesn't like doing that. He just doesn't know how to deal with his feelings. And he doesn't strike me as the kind of person that would go to therapy. So Rory is having to act sort of as his therapist, which is not exactly the role a girlfriend should be in. Yes, you listen to your partner, you help them work through their feelings, but it's not the same as what Rory was having to do. So why it works and why it doesn't work for teen Jess is that intellectually, he's the most on par with Rory. He's the most aligned with her intellectual ability. He respects her brain, her tastes, her ambition. He doesn't want to make her smaller. He likes that she's intense and nerdy. But teen Jess can't offer emotional stability. When it comes to adult Jess, he is a lot more grounded than teen Jess was. He found purpose, he found stability, and he literally nudges her back towards her goals. Ironically, by the time Jess is the healthiest, Rory is the most messy. In A Year in the Life, he comes back, seems to have his life totally together, and Rory does not at all. So I'm going to score this as teen Jess and adult Jess separately because I really do feel like they truly are kind of two different people. So starting with teen Jess, for respects Rory's goals, I'm giving him a 7 out of 10. He definitely is wishy-washy about things like going to Chilton because it's preppy. He doesn't necessarily love her goals about getting closer to her grandparents, and that means him getting closer to her grandparents. But intellectually, which is a large part of what motivates Rory, he definitely respects her goals. Emotional safety, I'm giving him a 3. He is not manipulative of Rory in any way, like Dean sort of was, but he's not safe for Rory either. He keeps leaving, and sometimes he'll just blow up and shut down. So for communication, I'm giving him a 2. Yeah, I don't think anybody could say that teen Jess is good at communication, but he speaks sometimes, so it's not a 0. For life stage fit in the teen era, I'm going to give him a 4. They're the same age, but he has a lot that he needs to figure out, and Rory is trying to grow and move on. Their maturity and emotional maturity at that time is not aligned, although their although although their intellectual ability is. So for Rory's growth, I'm going to give him a 5. He pushes Rory and does want to make her better, but he doesn't exactly know what better is because he's not there. And nobody in his life really is there. So while yes, he brings Rory growth, he also brings her a lot of stress. Now moving on to adult Jess. For respects her goals, I'm giving him a 9. I feel like in the later seasons of Gilmore Girls, as well as in A Year in the Life, he is very respectful of what she's doing and what she wants. He doesn't tell her that she needs to get her life together, but he sits there and he listens to her and he offers support if she needs it or wants it. For emotional safety, I'm going to do a 7 out of 10 because he definitely seems to have grown. He definitely seems to have his life together more and have more oh my gosh, emotional intelligence and stability, but we don't really get to see it. Same thing for communication. I'm going to give him a 7. Again, he definitely seems to be worlds better than he was as a teen, but we don't really get to see too much of it in the later seasons and in A Year in the Life. For life stage fit in a hypothetical adult relationship, I'm going to give it a 9. I mean, I feel like they're pretty aligned. Rory definitely has some things that she needs to work out, but in terms of life stage, like they could very feasibly be together and it could work because he is stable. So it allows her to be sort of unstable while she's figuring things out. And for Rory's growth, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Again, we just don't really get to see it, but he literally nudges her back onto the path that she wants to be on in the later seasons. She goes back to Yale. When she goes and meets Jess at his bookshop, he does kind of put her back on the path that he knows she wants to be on. Now, some people could say that this isn't respecting her goals, but let's be so for real. We know, she knows, everybody knows that dropping out of Yale, being in the DAR,
Why did you drop out of Yale?
those are not things that she actually wants. They're things that she feels like she needs to do, or on the opposite end, she feels like she can't go back to Yale. She's not good enough. She didn't get the job. She's fighting with Lorelai. So I feel like that is kind of her way of like punishing herself almost. And Jess is the only one who is able to tell her like, "Hey, no, this isn't you. This isn't what you want." So overall, Jess is not a bad boyfriend forever. I think that he's just right person, wrong time. And in my brain, Rory eventually gets back with him. Now moving on to Logan Huntzberger. Logan is probably the one that I see people rooting for the most. I definitely see some Team Jess. I literally don't think I've ever one singular time in my life seen somebody be Team Dean after like actually watching the show. But yeah, a lot of people really love Logan. So when it comes to Logan's background, he is old money family. He has intense parental pressure to take over the family business, to do well in school, to be prestigious. He's charming and witty, and he secretly has low self-esteem. When he and Rory first get involved, he wants it casual, not super into commitment. So, commitment issues are a major early trait. Later, he does end up supporting her through the grand gesture of helping with the Yale Daily News takeover. He's present in that crisis for her, which I think is a really big thing for her. But he also cheats and hides things. contributing to messy dynamics. A lot of people note that his arc is definitely privilege versus responsibility. He's trying to figure out who he is, what he's doing, what his purpose is. He's trying to define his own path separate from his family. For Logan's psychological read, I would say, did I just go cross eyed? I would say his attachment style is avoidant and hedonistic. He parties a lot, he's very into risk taking, he doesn't like labels, that kind of thing. Underneath, I think there is that low self esteem and pressure that he has from his family, which shows up as like, I don't want to promise anything that I might fail at. In terms of his fit with Rory, life stage wise, they're both in their early 20s. They're both at Yale. They're both figuring out their path. He definitely pushes her to try new experiences with the Life and Death Brigade, the Yale social world and risk taking, and they definitely can keep up with each other intellectually. Some cast and creator commentary define Logan as the more mature, grown up boyfriend. However, he does enable some of her worst habits. She has a tendency to avoid real life, to sort of live in this fantasy world without actually facing reality. And when Logan proposes, it's kind of the same thing that happened with Dean. She says no, and so he's no longer willing to pursue the relationship. She's willing to try, she's willing to do long distance, and he's just like, nah, if we're not going to get married, then no thanks. However, I will say that Rory did not really fight for him. He was just like, no, I'm pretty sure if we're not going to get married, we probably should break up. And she's just like, okay, you know. Logan is essentially Rory's study abroad phase. Like, he's so different. She is so different when she's with him, but then she like comes back to reality. She actually doesn't, but she should. But you know what I mean? Like, when you go study abroad, you're like kind of a different person. You're in a different world. You don't know anybody. And then you come back to your life and like you take what you learned, but you're back with people you know in a space you know. That's kind of how I feel like Logan was for her. And of course, in A Year in the Life, they end up having an affair. Rory just really loves to be the other woman. Logan is engaged and yet sleeping with Rory. To me, I'm just like kind of mind blown by that because Rory literally has options. Like, she has options. She knows that she could go back to Jess if she wanted to. And I don't really understand why she doesn't do that. But I don't understand pretty much anything that she does in A Year in the Life, so kind of tracks. Like, their situation in A Year in the Life is less meant to be and more like mutually assured emotional regression. So, for Logan's score, respecting her goals, I'm going to give him a 7. He does support her, but he also kind of distracts her when she decides she wants to drop out of Yale. He treats it more as like a joke instead of realizing that she's going through something. Because I feel like if he really truly knew her, he would know that the only reason she would drop out of Yale is if she was struggling, like internally, mentally, emotionally. And he does actually know that she's struggling because she is fighting with Lorelai at the time. But I feel like, he makes bets with his friends about it instead of trying to address the actual problem. But overall, he does respect her goals. For emotional safety, I'm going to give him a 6. He's not controlling, but there definitely are like secrets and chaos within their relationship. Communication, I'm going to do a 7. He's definitely better than Jess or Dean at actually talking. Like, later in their relationship, not A Year in the Life, but like season 7 and even season 6, I think, their communication is actually really good. They have arguments, they do fight, but they're able to talk through it and get over that hump, which is really important. Like, in a relationship, it's not that you're never going to fight, it's that you know how to fight well, if that makes sense. You know how to argue and stand your ground without hurting the other person, and you know how to then get over it and come back together. You know how to deal with it as you and your partner against the problem versus you against your partner. And I feel like that they do a good job of that in the later seasons. But he still is evasive. There are definitely times when he does not handle things well. He runs off to Vegas. For life stage fit, I'm actually going to give him a 9 because they are like the same age. I mean, he's older than her, but generally the same age. They're at Yale together. They know who their friends are. They know what they want, or they're figuring out what they want. Like, they generally are in the same stage of life. Now, in A Year in the Life, that's not necessarily true. They are still the same age, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they're in the same stage of life because Logan seems to have it together a lot more than Rory, except for the fact that he's having an affair. But in terms of like his job situation and his appearance of a relationship, he has it more together than Rory does. For growth, I'm gonna give it a 6. She does grow with him at first, but then it sort of stagnates, and then in A Year in the Life, especially, it regresses. So I think Logan is the right boyfriend for Rory's I'm 21 and making dubiously ethical choices in designer clothes era. So before we get to the final verdict, I do want to throw in a few honorable mentions. We have Tristan. He's flirtatious but totally chaotic and actually a jerk, so that's a no for me. We have Marty, very kind, very grounded, but poor communication about his feelings. He's kind of the like, should we just date kind of guy. And Rory's not really into that. And poor Paul. Paul is the symbolic representation of how Rory treats people when she's emotionally checked out and has other stuff going on. Justice for Paul. Like, she actually treats him terribly. And I think that that honestly is a really good view of, like, kind of how Rory is as a person. The last point I want to make before we get to the verdict is that I think a lot of detriment when it comes to Rory's relationships is Rory. Like, I know she's like our perfect little girl, but she's not actually. I'm not saying that people can't mess up. Obviously, everybody's going to make mistakes, everybody's going to go through phases. But overall, Rory is kind of she's kind of a brat. Like, she's had a lot of things handed to her because Lorelai didn't have things handled to her. Like, the whole town sees her as this like perfect little girl and they all want to just give her everything. So it is kind of like Rory's world. Like, imagine what all of the other kids feel like when they graduate and they don't get a big party. You know, like the town treats Rory literally as their queen. And I think that that inflated her ego and disabled her truly from like growing and being a like good functioning adult in society. But anyways, that's a topic for another video. So these are the averages for the boyfriends. Who is objectively the healthiest version of a partner? Adult Jess, 100%. Who fits the version of Rory that we got on screen? For high school Rory, Dean. Dean seems right. For Yale era Rory, Logan definitely fits. For a hypothetical Rory with therapy and awareness, adult Jess is definitely the answer. Overall, I don't think that it was bad of her to be in any of those relationships. Like, I think Dean was a good first boyfriend. I think Logan is the developmental match. Perfect for her messy 20s, not necessarily forever. And Jess, I think, is the soulmate in progress. Like, I can't tell you how truly and earnestly I feel that Jess is the right person, wrong time. Like, that's why I say, in my head, Rory ends up with Jess. She gets her life together and realizes that Jess is the one. Or, additionally, she starts talking to Jess because her life isn't together and he helps her get her life back together and they live happily ever after. Oh, but I did in fact forget about the little tidbit that they drop in at the end of A Year in the Life. Hmm. Maybe we can make a video about like looking at Rory's hypothetical life after A Year in the Life. Let me know if you want that. Overall, I think Rory needs to go to therapy. I think they all need to go to therapy. Like, let's be so for real. And also, we need to stop cheating on people in cute codes, okay? The cute codes don't take away from the fact that you're literally cheating on your partner. Stop doing it. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments if you are Team Dean, Team Jess, or Team Logan, or if you're Team Scott Patterson and they're all bums. If you liked this video, make sure to like and subscribe, especially if you like overanalyzing fictional characters because I have thoughts on a lot of different shows. Have a good day.